gonna spice things up a bit for this week. Let's see if I can get through an entire can of crab juice before this video's done. Ugh. Oh god, that crab juice is a bad idea. Oh my fuck, that was terrible. Fuck. Alright, let's get the show on the road. This is another game that I got to during my last Steam Next Fest video. Another Crab's Treasure was developed and published by Agrro Crab Games, the independent development team behind the 2020 roguelike/vicious tech industry satire Going Under. Instead of going back to that well, they are instead taking their satirical and goofy chops to the Souls-like genre. Released last month to critical and commercial success, Another Crab's Treasure is probably the only game other than Lies of P to really get what a Souls-like is, in my opinion. This requires some background context, so buckle up, class. Back in 2011, yes, I know Demon's Souls came out in 2008 and Kingsfield as a series goes all the way back to PlayStation 1, but I'm starting here for simplicity's sake. From Software released Dark Souls, and it kind of took the world by storm. While yes, the main thrust of the advertising was the difficulty, the world was the main selling point. You were going through this world on the verge of death long past its time, clinging to the embers of life and refusing to let go. And if I'm being honest, it feels like Another Crab's Treasure understood this. It obviously takes place at the bottom of the ocean, complete with an overabundance of trash. Trash permeates everything in this game. It's used as currency in the form of microplastics, which are the game's stand-in for souls. Pollution is a stand-in for the curse of undeath, referred to as the gunk. The reef that Another Crab's Treasure takes place in is also desperately clinging to life because of said trash. The main city you go to is literally made of trash, and so on and so forth. Hell, there's even a large open area of the map called the Sands Between, and I think that's funny. But at the same time, its main differentiator is that it's nowhere near as much of a bummer in terms of tone. Another Crab's Treasure sports a bright, colorful, and honestly kinda cute art style that goes a long way to stylize its characters into something appealing. This works out in the game's favor because if you know anything about what sea life looks like, you'll know they'll look at best kinda ugly, and at worst, like terrifying sea creatures that'll make anything in the Cthulhu mythos shit its pants. Yeah, remember that the next time you make fun of Aquaman, kids. There is some inventive stuff on display here, like a crab that uses an orange peel as a wig, lobsters that look like mounted knights, and a Dungeness crab that looks like a duchess. This also goes with how more friendly or notable characters look more anthropomorphic in anatomy, and enemies for the most part look more animalistic. Plus, there's some good environmental storytelling in here as well, like the use of different kinds of junk as architecture. It's good stuff! That goofiness also translates to the narrative as well. You play as Krill, an adorable little hermit crab who gets his shell taken from him because a duchess recently expanded her territory and decided that he was behind on his taxes. So he has to go on a whole winding quest to get his shell back. Along the way, he meets a colorful cast of characters who help and hinder him in various ways. Like the aesthetic, it is light and silly for the most part, but it also uses that to its advantage. This is a world that is beholden to the whims of the almighty microplastic. If you haven't got the trash, you can't get jack. This ends up being the downfall of the starting area by way of gunk corruption. After the collapse, you make your way to the city of New Carcinia on Trash Day, and it leads to a whole series of quests. After finding out the local fence has your shell, you gotta get it back there. A lot of the goofiness comes in the form of puns and self-aware writing. My favorite example of this has to be when you fight the first boss of the game, Nephro, the captain of the guard. You ostensibly kill the captain in self-defense, and this is followed by a series of characters in the Duchess's castle telling you about how much of a stand-up guy Nephro is, and what a good sense of humor he has. And it is the perfect encapsulation for the sense of comedy that Another Crab's Treasure goes for. But it also has a lot to say about how humanity's indifference towards the environment is slowly choking the life out of the planet, and how the aquatic life of the sea is beholden to the junk economy despite it directly killing them, because it's either adapt to this or literally die. The character Roland, an isopod who's both a major business player in New Carcinia and the self-proclaimed de facto mayor, and the inciting incident of Krill getting his shell repossessed for not paying taxes to a government he didn't even know existed, which feels weird because as a hermit crab, he found it first. While not as angry to the level as last week's video Mullet Matt Jack, there's still some displeasure about how capitalism kinda fucks everything up for everyone. Now that I think about it, this is the second time this has happened since coming back to making videos. If I had a nickel every time a game I covered had explicit anti-capitalist commentary, I'd have 2 nickels.
Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
That's enough rumination on the aesthetics and theming. Let's get to the gameplay. Oh, and before I forget, Oh, God. Excuse me. Oh. Why am I still drinking this stuff? Why am I torturing myself like this? Because my mother didn't raise a fucking quitter, that's why. Where was I again? Oh yeah, the gameplay. Another Crab's Treasure is touted as something of a more accessible entry in the Souls-like subgenre of action RPG. You got your regular attacks, your charge attacks, strong attacks, dodging, the works. Defense is where things get weird and interesting. As a hermit crab, krill doesn't have a shell, a simple fact of biology as I'm told. This makes it so that you can use the various pieces of trash as shells. There is a very nice 69 in total, all with different stats and effects. Soda cans that shoot out bubbles, sriracha caps that make you spin like a Beyblade, coconuts that offer super thick defense and the ability to roll around at the speed of sound, the list goes on and on. The main catch is that all of these have a limited shelf life. You can block and parry with these to get some decent defense, but they all lose a bit of health each time, and all can be destroyed in about 5 or 6 hits unless it's a heavier shell like a coconut that gives you a near maxed out shield bar at the cost of slower movement. There are a lot of trade-offs to consider when thinking about how the shells work, and I think that's a great way to convey choice from a mechanics perspective. It's one of the main ways Another Crab's Treasure makes itself more approachable for players who don't play these games often, while also making sure there's something for players like me who've been playing these games for the better part of 16 years. Oh my god, 16 years, I can feel it in my knees. To sink their teeth into. There's also the stat progression, since you still have the whole your currency is also your experience points mechanic to work with. You die, you lose your currency and your shell, so that's a bit more of an incentive to get the corpse run not end in tragedy this time around. But some things can soften the blow. There's a bevy of assist mode options like increasing or decreasing the timing windows on parries and how much health your shells have, and quite humorously, making one of your shells into a fucking gun that can one-shot enemies. I didn't use it personally, but it's the kind of option that's so ridiculous that I can't help but laugh at it. But in a this is very clearly a joke type way. It's some seeking refuge and audacity shit. I adore it. Here's another way that Another Crab's Treasure is more approachable. Let's say you get killed in a boss fight. You think, oh man, I gotta go all the way back to the bonfire thing. No, you do not. You, in fact, spawn right in front of the boss door where your microplastics and shell are waiting for you. Kind of like the stakes of Marika and Elden Ring. It also takes the Bloodborne approach to stats. There are 4 in total. 1 for your health, 1 for your attacks, 1 for your defense, and 1 for increasing the power of your shell attacks. It keeps things simple in a way that newer players won't get overwhelmed by. A lot of the depth can also be wrung out from the skill trees as well. There are 3 in total. 1 focuses on strengthening your defenses, another focuses on making your attacks more powerful, and the third mostly focuses on mobility in your shell attacks. They're upgraded by finding special umami crystals out in the world. You can get clusters of them out in the open world as a means of incentivizing exploration, and killing enemies that have glowing eyes. Now you're probably wondering, what the heck is umami? Aside from it being a fancy way of calling a dish savory, it's Another Crab's Treasure's way of designating magic. You meet a creature called a moon snail early on who teaches you how to use the stuff and acts as your firekeeper of sorts. Another major departure from the Souls formula is the role of New Carcinia. It acts as your hub area in Another Crab's Treasure, and it's where you can employ the services of a bunch of other sea folk, such as buying new outfits, getting stowaways that are this game's versions of rings and talismans, selling junk you find out in the world for more microplastics, talking to the blacksmith to upgrade your fork, buy new shells for your collection. It's all there. One nice feature you can also buy when buying shells is a thing called shell insurance, where you can pay the shell merchant a fee to make it so that you can't lose your shell that's currently equipped upon death, which is a nice feature. All of this stuff is nice. But it doesn't detract from the fact that Another Crab's Treasure is still intended to be an incredibly challenging game. All the stuff I mentioned earlier about approachability, all in service to getting people's feet in the door. You still need to get good, as the kids say, which is a fancy way of saying you need to pay attention to the enemy attack patterns on top of all of your abilities, shell health, umami charges to get back from attacks, and to use your shell powers, etc. This is best showcased in the boss fights, which are the definition of tough but fair, since they all have telegraphed attacks that are readable enough to see coming, but don't come off as cheap, which is a great balance to strike. But the biggest thing that always catches me off guard for Another Crab's Treasure is the fact that outside of the RPG mechanics and combat, This game was a straight up platformer. A lot of the level design is a mix of twisting verticality and dotted platform jumping. Lots and lots of platform jumping. This works out because Another Crab's Treasure uses that layout of levels to make locations that, while not having the near Metroidvania levels of interconnectedness of Dark Souls, there's still a lot of hidden nooks and crannies, and the areas themselves unlock a lot of shortcuts that make corpse runs easier to manage and to get through those areas faster. It also uses these locales to tell its stories with the interconnected theme of this trash is all hurting us in some way. Another Crab's Treasure is a standout title for a studio that only has one other developed game in their retinue. It uses its literal trash theming to make a treasure of a setting that warns of the dangers of rampant pollution, while also having decent combat, approachable systems, and good platforming wrapped up in a great sense of humor. If you have Game Pass, go download it. I highly recommend this. And if you don't have Game Pass, go get it when you can. It's a very good game. And that'll be it for this week's video. If you stayed till the end, thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Spread it around if you're feeling generous. Oh, and before I go, fuck you, Crab Juice. Fuck you. You know, on hindsight, that actually wasn't half bad.